the live stream now, so we're all there ready. Davey lad, can you hear us? Okay, Dave?
Fine.
You fine? Yeah.
Can you see you like what Nick?
You what, mate?
I can't see you what Nick yet like.
It'll
See
come.
myself.
It'll come on in a minute. I've
Right,
just activated the live stream now, and it'll.
Yeah.
It takes about 10 seconds, 20 seconds for it to catch up on itself. There we go. I can see you now. Well, welcome to the Mackem Cabbie show with Nick Barnes and Davey. How you doing, Davey?
All right, mate, Jim.
Good. You had a good week, few days.
Aye.
It's also a busy night on the football scene now with the
the Premier League, aye.
Merseyside derby, but this is more important than that, isn't it?
And them up the roads playing.
Who? Oh, you mean them in black and whites?
Aye.
Come here, Summer. Oh, good girl. Thank you, darling. Get off. Me daughter, bless her. Oh, it's great, like, you know what I mean. But it's when you got like 3 kids and stuff. So our daughter Summer, she's got Down syndrome and she's autistic, but she's bright as a button. She goes to mainstream school.
Brilliant.
Me twin boys are outside and trying to have a full-time job and run a YouTube channel and that. It's hard work, but I bloody love it.
Aye, good on you.
And it's good to have you on board if you don't mind coming on. We'll go back to our weekly show on a Monday, Davey. It's just the fact that Nick Barnes could only manage the Wednesday one tonight, you know.
Right, I'm back.
Sorry.
Hi, Nick. How you doing? He's back.
Sorry, I was at the Supporters Awards last night, so I couldn't do it last night.
No,
we're not
understandable.
on the Sports Awards, Nick.
Mm.
Have you got the right envelope?
Oh, what a nightmare that was. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. You couldn't make it up.
Yeah, Davey was...
Nobody's fault. I mean, it's one of those chain of events that is nobody's gone out of their way to try and,
Sabotage it.
Sabotage it, yeah. But it's just one of those literally nobody thought to check this or check that, and then it goes down the line. God.
All ended smoothly, though.
Yeah, well, it all ended fine, but there's a moment in your head, that sliding doors moment, when you think, right, do I say anything, or do I just take the plunge and say what's written on the envelope, what's written on the card in the envelope? And I went with that, and it was right. But oh dear.
The Oscars, Nick.
It was a well deserved choice for the winner, you think, Nick?
It's when I look back at the season, it's a difficult one because I think Jack Clark is an outstanding player, but I think he's a little bit one-dimensional. I think, and it's hard to say because the Newcastle game, taken in isolation, is probably a difficult one to take because nobody really turned up that day. And Jack Clark was one of 11 that didn't really. I thought, actually, saying that, I thought Ballard, despite the mistakes, actually had not a bad game. But I think the problem with Clark, and I love him, and I think he's a brilliant player. He's undoubtedly got, he's got something. Is that if he goes to the Premier League defenders will be more savvy as to what he's trying to do, and will sort of cancel him out. So I wonder if he's going to be like, you often talk about strikers are they not good enough for the Premier League, but they're too good for the Championship? I've got a horrible feeling about Jack Clark. He might be one of those players.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's his pace, Nick. I don't think he's got the pace for the Premier League.
You could be right. Yeah. I think I'm looking at it now, and the window and summer, and the fact that Premier League clubs will not be throwing the money around that they have been in the past. If Leeds go up, I think Leeds would be a good fit for him. It's
Yeah.
Yorkshire, it's home. He might not play every game, but I think he would get games there. He would certainly be remunerated. He would get the wages that he probably deserves, which he's not getting now. So, yeah, it's a tricky one.
2 seconds, my daughter just wants to go outside. This is live from my household.
Brilliant.
Come on, come in. It's too cold. Come on now. You go and sit there and watch the telly, darling. It's too cold, sweetheart. Is the door open, door closed? Door closed? Girl. Oh, I'm back. Hello.
Hello. Whereabouts are you in Carlisle? Are you?
Yeah. I'm born and bred in Carlisle. I just live in a place called Warwick Bridge, Corby Hill. You'll have heard of it, Nick?
I know it very well. Yeah, I know it really well. Yeah.
Lovely part of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
My good friend Derek Lacey, who used to do the Carlisle commentaries, lived in Corby Hill.
Gentleman, the late Derek Lacey. I picked him up a lot
Yeah.
in me taxi. He used to drink at a place called Dempsey's at the top of Warwick Road, and regular as clockwork, he'd roll into me taxi at about 2:30 in the morning, and
Really? Brilliant.
and you know,
Alan Smart.
eh?
Do you remember Alan Smart, the Carlisle striker? He lived in Warwick Bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. There was there's a co-commentator for Radio Cumbria as well that he used to live round the corner from where I live. I'm trying to think of his name. He played for Sunderland years ago.
Chris Lumsden.
Yes, Chris Lumsden. Yeah.
Chris Lumsden. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I picked him up a few times and stuff when he's merry. But Derek Lacey, though, he was great listening to on the commentary. I mean, he was well known for getting things wrong, like it's a goal kick when it's a corner, an example. But he just laughed at it, and that's what people loved about him.
We've all been there, don't worry.
Yeah, I missed obviously what you were saying because I was sorting the bands out there. You were talking about like Jack Clark and stuff, and
Jack Clark, yeah.
I think it opened everybody's eyes, didn't it, when we played Newcastle at the Stadium of Light, and as you said before, we can't just single out Jack Clark. It was such a half-hearted effort by the lads, but it sort of opened our eyes a bit, didn't it? When like Trippier had him in his back pocket, and he had he was just miles off the pace, wasn't he? And it's a lot of us have sort of thought like, well, how would he do in the Premier League if that's what he's going to be like? He'll really struggle.
I mean, I try to look back at that game and take it in isolation, because I think Trey Hume, who I think is a fantastic defender, he got exposed on the afternoon as well, and the midfield was overrun. I've got to look at it and say it was a bad day for the team. On another afternoon, if they turned up, they would have given Newcastle a game. And I think the problem was that we all then a few weeks later watched Blackburn play Newcastle. I think probably we'd agree that Blackburn are a poorer team than Sunderland at the moment, or were, and they gave them a real game. And I think everybody felt then, or I felt then, we'd missed an opportunity. I thought Sunderland should have been doing to Newcastle what Blackburn did to them on the day, and it may have been an altogether different story.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm often wondering, if with the likes of Tony Mowbray departing, and then and then Dodds coming in, and then Bale coming in, it's probably messed with the players' heads a little bit. And I think that the team togetherness just wasn't quite there when we played Newcastle. It was so obvious to see, wasn't it?
I think that's a fair point. I think the players did all love Tony Mowbray, and there was a big. I think that there were a lot of them sort of hurt when he left and felt that they were a bit isolated. I don't think Michael Beale was particularly charismatic. I don't think there was a great deal of empathy in terms of the way that he could respond to the players. I think that was quite apparent. And I think, everything that's sort of followed on this season is a result, if you like, of the Tony Mowbray sacking. But, the other side of it is there were a lot of injuries. And, I think going forward, Tony Mowbray, if he hadn't been sacked, would probably have resigned after what had happened at the end of last season, summer, pre-season. So, and then as it turns out, with unfortunately the situation that Tony's found himself in now medically, we'd have probably lost Tony towards the end of the season anyway. So there would have been at some point change, but the club failed to handle the change properly and allowed it to drift, if you like, into this malaise we've got now at the end of the season where there's nothing to play for. We're wondering what's going to happen this summer, what decisions are going to be taken regarding the head coach, recruitment, restructuring of the football club. It's such a huge summer. I can't remember even, takeovers and the like over the last few years. I can't remember a summer that's as significant and important as this summer is for Sunderland.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially, Davey, as you know well, don't you often mention as well the terrifying silence, Davey, from our owners, and it just seems to be even more eyes on them now for this summer's coming up to see if they've learnt or what they're going to do.
Yeah, it's so frustrating, the lack of noise coming from them. I think back to when we got promoted from Division 1, coming out to Wembley, and Speakman was never off the telly. He was on the radio, he was on the telly, talking about the progression and all this. But since things started going wrong, you've never heard a whisper out of him. And it's just so, frustrating, not hearing nothing.
I think there's a degree of... we had a conversation with Christian Speakman. I say we, it would be me and the two or three other members of the local press when Pritchard left. And we got the warts and all about why Pritchard had gone and what had happened. And as part of that conversation, Christian Speakman said, I can't respond to every criticism. I can't come on every time someone says, you should have done this or you should have done that. I've got to be very selective about when I make appearances or do a press conference or explain what's happened. Now, I understand that. I think that's sensible. I think otherwise he would, with Sunderland, he would be on the radio or whatever every day. That's just the way that Sunderland is. But I do think there needs to be more transparency from the very top. I think there needs to be more communication from Kyril as to what he intends to do, what his plans are for the football club, because I don't think any of us really know where he intends to take the football club and which direction he's going with the model, if you like, because we don't really get any, and I use this word advisedly because we're hearing a lot of it recently. We haven't been getting any clarity on where the club's going at the moment. And I think we'd all agree that the one thing that has become increasingly obvious as the season has gone on, and it's something that Tony Mowbray was particularly trenchant about, was the fact there's the lack of experience in the team. And what do? They get rid of Bart and they get rid of Gooch, and Evans gets injured, and we've got no leaders in the sense of players that can have, may play 400 or 500 games, who, when you're 4-0 down or 5-1 down, whatever, they've got the ability to turn to the younger players and direct them and maneuver them and manage them on the game, manage them. And it's something that I think is sadly lacking.
Yeah, definitely. Just having all the players, Nick, when things go wrong, quite often in games, things go wrong, you can't do nothing about it. But the older players would take the flack away from the young lads who have just been pounded and pounded by everything.
What they do is they would be on the pitch and say, right, look, come on, have a word, 5 minutes, just calm down, let's take the ball in the corner, slow it down, pass it around, take the sting out of the opposition, and let's start again. And don't. I think there's a danger with this young team that when things start to go awry, nobody wants to take responsibility. Older players, experienced players will take that responsibility on in a game. Younger players don't, because they're terrified that a misplaced pass, a misplaced shot, anything like that will only bring ire down on them from the fans, and they'll get battered. And that's like a domino effect through the team because it's so young. Nobody wants to take that responsibility on. And that's what that's what you lose with the experience. That's what you lose with those sort of leaders that you've got in the dressing room.
Yeah, there's no
You've got to have them.
there's nobody on the pitch to point the fingers and stuff. I remember the Kevin Ball from back in the Roker Park days and stuff. He was I'm surprised his finger didn't drop off the pointing, and he was doing to all the players. But that's what you need, as you say, Nick. You need that someone to look up to on the pitch to keep their heads together, if anything else.
Well, more recently, Lee Cattermole was another example of that sort of player. You know, wore his heart on his sleeve, left everything on the pitch. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I think Luke O'Nien is that sort of character, but he's a bit too unpredictable. I think that you know, as much as I love Luke, and I think he gives his all, and he is a fighter, and he loves the club. There is the unpredictability of Luke is sometimes something that probably works against him, because the opposition know that that's a potential weakness in the opposition, and you know, and the opposition will always do their homework. They'll always know which players to wind up. They'll always know which players to exploit. And you know, good sides need to be aware and certainly very. I mean, take the Millwall game for example. They knew how Millwall were going to set up. They knew how Millwall were going to play. But there was nobody on the pitch that sort of grasped that during the game and said, right, come on. We've got to try something different here. We've got to be a bit adventurous. We've got to gamble a bit. Nothing to lose. They're not going down. They weren't going up. But nobody during that game had the wit or the guile to say, right, look, I'm apart from maybe I would sit back and say Chris Rigg, who seems to have the self-confidence and the nerve to take players on at the moment.
It's funny you were saying about the psyching other players up and winding other players up and that, and I noticed on the latest instalment of Sun Until I Die that season when Luke O'Nien, before his operation, his shoulder kept popping out, and there was a clip in Sun Until I Die. It was like off camera how many times you've seen players off the ball giving him a nudge to trying to pop his shoulder back out, and it's amazing off what we don't see really as fans what goes on out there.
I think we knew at the time when he had the issue with the shoulder. We used to say in commentary, you knew players right from the start were gunning for him. They knew that if they could that they leant into him or knocked him to the floor, there was every chance the shoulder would pop. You know, but that's the sort of thing about homework that teams do now. I mean, they're so thorough. There's nothing much really escapes the analysts and the homework that they do on the teams.
No.
So you've got to find that 10%, that extra 10% that gives you the advantage. And I think, you know, this end of season as well, you've got to factor in. I mean, I'm not saying for one moment necessarily that Callum Stiles doesn't sort of try harder or give his 100%, but he's going to the Euros in the summer with Hungary. The last thing he wants in these last couple of games is to get injured. So psychologically, at the back of your mind, the players have got that in their heads as well. Players like Jack Clark, does he want to get injured if he's thinking about a move, and so on and so on. So there's all those things intertwine and interweave in players' minds.
Yeah, I mean it's a massive moment, isn't it, for the Euros for the players coming up. I tell you a player as well who's like on social media and the fans have criticised a lot is Pierre Ekwa. Ever since he got injured not long after the Southampton game, he just does not seem to be the player that he was. And me and Dave's talked about it as well, as the fact like he's one game he's brilliant, and the next game he's just trotting around like he can't be bothered, and it's frustrating because we know the player he can be, but he's just so hot and cold, Ekwa at the moment, isn't he?
He is, and I don't know how much the injury has impacted him. I don't know how much it's because he would rather play further forwards. and he's not entirely comfortable with the role that he's being given. Tony Mowbray also, his concern with Pierre was the fact that he was such a big midfielder that his physical presence should have been more impactful. He should have been using that athleticism more. And I think he had a point, and we know that there is a player in Pierre Ekwa. As a character, he's laid back. I mean, he's genuinely a very, very sort of laid back character, but he loves playing football. It's in his blood. It's all he wants to do. But I think, with all these conversations with this team, we keep talking about them as though we're talking about a team that's been playing together for 5 or 6 years. They're still in their early 20s. They've still relatively played no football. Pierre Ekwa, Adji Elise, all these players were playing under 23s football a year or two ago. And now we're watching them in one of the most competitive leagues in the world. I mean, it's arguably more physical and more testing than the Premier League, because in the Premier League, it's technique rules over physicality, if you like, and skill rules over physicality. The Championships in between the two, it's very physical, it's very demanding, it's 46 games a season, and we're forgetting that we've got Job at 18, Rig at 16, Dan Neil, who's one of the most experienced players, is 22. It's a very, very young team, and I think sometimes we have to step back and look at that and say we've got to give that team, we've got to compensate our frustration and anger or whatever we might have again, and put it against the fact that they are novices really in a very, very tough league.
A lot of them won't have, as you say, experienced anything like the Stadium of Light and the crowds that we get, and it's I suppose it's all right for us and easy for us fans to get frustrated and shout, but I suppose put yourself in their shoes, and like you said before, this is where we need that experience, we need that balance on the pitch, which was so much lacking.
We do, and I think there's a recognition from the club now that this summer's recruitment's got to reflect that.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see the team remoulded, if you like, with a bit more experience in it. And I mean, look, going back to the beginning of the season, Bradley Dack's signing was meant to be a player with experience. It was meant to be a Pritchard replacement. It didn't work. It hasn't worked out because of Dack picking up so many injuries. But in essence, there was a player there that Tony wanted in the setup who's very, very good with the young players, but has also got the experience and gets goals. It hasn't worked. I mean, and you can never legislate for that. You couldn't legislate for Huggins' injury. You couldn't necessarily legislate for Sirkin's injury, and so on. So you've got to reflect on that as well. But you've got then also to look at the wider picture, and you've got to question again, and something Davey mentioned earlier on about we need to know, we need more transparency on which direction the club's going, what their plans are, what the infrastructure is going to be, and this 5-year plan to return to the Premier League, to be honest, is probably, you could probably rip that up now, because we're 2-3 years in and looking at effectively rebuilding the team this summer for next season.
I think what's been.
Do you think we've lost our identity, Nick?
I think there's an argument that they have. I think I've had a few conversations in the last week or so about what's happened to the football that we were watching under Tony Mowbray to the football that we're watching now. And even tonight on Total Sport, there was a caller saying the football is just not the football that we were watching under Tony Mowbray. So there is an argument the identity has slipped away, and I think they need to reinvent themselves, if you like, next season. Yeah.
Which makes the choice of coach stroke manager an absolutely massive one.
It's huge. It's huge. Absolutely huge.
Funny to say that. There's a SJ on the chat just says we've got some questions from Nick, but we'll get to them later on, the last 10 minutes or so. SJ says, don't understand why they can't just get a decent coach in Surely that's the most important thing to get right. This is the person that needs to get the best out of the players, and certainly not ones like Beale, etc.
Well, it is the most important thing, and it's the $1 million question: who's it going to be? Will they be right? We won't know until they start coaching. Ooh, I mean, every coach that comes in thinks they're going to be the one that's going to crack it.
Yeah.
And over the last decade, every one of those has been the ones that has walked away afterwards and looking back, thinking, "What on earth went wrong?" It's not the impossible job, but it needs. What does it need? It needs someone who I think has got the personality and the character to carry such a big football club. It's got to be someone who can embrace and nurture younger players. It's got to be someone who's bold enough to stand up, and when they think they need whatever it might be, a striker or experience, they're strong enough to stand up for that. So there's a lot of ingredients.
You sound like you're talking about Tony Mowbray.
Well, to a certain extent, I mean, I probably am.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of fans would still argue that he'd taken the club as far as he could, and that might well be the case. But I think looking back, the mistake that was made was in prematurely last season looking to get rid of him. I think they should have had the courage of their convictions when they appointed him to let him run his course. Now that course may well have ended in him resigning or being sacked this season because the results weren't going well, but that wasn't the case. And I think the one thing that this club's been crying out for years is stability, and we actually had stability in the club had stability in their hands with Tony Mowbray, and decided to eject him. And so sometimes they're masters of their own downfall, and now they've got to repair the damage from that, which is not inconsiderable.
I mean, we've seen some of the best football we've seen in a long time. The season when we had Diallo on that, and when we had that final surge to actually miraculously make the playoffs. The football we were playing was so entertaining to watch. It was fast, it was flowing, we were cutting defences open. The goal that always sticks in my mind and a lot of fans was that amazing goal that was scored at Reading, that team goal. And when we played at West Brom away, and we were just really playing some lovely, entertaining football without under Mowbray, weren't we?
Well, they were, and they had the diamond in Ahmad. Obviously,
of course they did.
When Ahmad sort of kicked in, and he, as a consequence, that was where we saw Patrick Roberts at his best. I think we all agree that Patrick Roberts has struggled to recover that form because he's lost someone who he could play off so effectively. And I think the players last season played without fear. They were young. I mean, that is one positive about a young team, is when things are going well, they do play without fear. They play with confidence, and those players that have got ability and talent, then when it comes together fantastically. And on the other side of that, the flip side, of course, is that it could go horribly wrong, and they could lose games 3 or 4-0, or the Stoke game they lost 5-1. So you have to accept that that's one of the frailties of that. But Tony had the players, I think, giving him an extra 10% because of who he was, and that's why I think you've got to get that coach appointment right, because ultimately, if you want the team to perform, the players have got to trust who's in charge, and they've got to believe that who's in charge is the right person to be developing their futures.
It seems to have been frustrating as well. The players that we could have, and we just seem to let slip through the fingers. Like Ellis Sims, he's doing well at Coventry. Nathan Broadhead, even Jan and Via kept tweeting how he wants to come to Sunderland. He's now at West Brom. It's the fact like everybody goes on about Sunderland being this giant of a club, the biggest club in the Championship, but yet we keep missing out on these players constantly. I mean, it's frustrating, isn't it, seeing like the Broadheads and the Ellis Sims banging the goals in for Coventry, and it's like, well, why haven't we got them? Have we not done enough to get them?
I think part of this is. Sorry, Davey.
So I'm saying it's all down to the wages why we haven't get these players.
Yeah. No, that's
if we not give Jack Clark more money, there's no chance of us giving the likes of these.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's the reason we haven't got the Sims and the Broadheads and other players. I mean, this is where it's very difficult because you've got morally an owner who wants to make the club sustainable, and I think we'd all accept that we don't want to get in the position the club's been in before, massively in debt, and to go down that road again. But I think everybody wants to try and find the balance between spending and making yourselves viable potential promotion contenders, and not a team that's going to slip back. Look at Sheffield Wednesday back into League One. Not that they are there yet, but it potentially could do. And balance has got to be struck somewhere. Now, Ipswich Town are paying Broadhead wages in excess of £30,000 a week. Don't know what Sims is on at Coventry, but I'd suspect it won't be far removed from that. Middlesbrough are paying £40,000 a week. There are teams in the higher part, take Leeds, Leicester and Southampton out of the equation, because they're paying £50,000 a week. But there are teams in the Championship, Ipswich, as I just mentioned, because of the money they're paying Broadhead, they'll be paying Kiefer Moore whatever he's been earning at Bournemouth in the Premier League. Now, Sunderland can't compete with that. The flip side of that is that Ipswich have taken a massive gamble. If they don't go up this season, they've got some serious questions to address as to their, it's not FFP now, is it? It's profit and sustainability. But they've got huge issues in that respect to address. They could find themselves having to offload all those players. And so there is a balance to be struck somewhere. And I think for me, the balance is that you've got to gamble to a certain extent in football on being in contention. And I think Sunderland at the moment has not probably gambled financially enough to make sure they're a team in contention. Because I think players like Dan Neil, Dan Ballard, Trey Hughes probably deserve to earn a lot more money than they're earning at the moment. And if players like that the incentive, they will stay with a football club. But if you're allowing Jack Clark, Dan Neil and all these players, and they will all be aware of what players are earning at other clubs because they know them, they speak to them. If you're making them aware that they can make more money at, even top half Championship clubs, lower half Premier League clubs, they will be incentivized to move. And that's where Sunderland have got, I think, to bite the bullet here and say, let's gamble a bit on the wages that we're paying. Let's be a bit more competitive. Let's appeal to the players' greed, if you want a better word, at the same time as telling them, we'll give you 10,000 a week or 15,000 a week. And if we will talk about add-ons in the next year of your contract, we might be able to get to 20,000 a week, which is what Tony Mowbray said, how Blackburn worked it, because you'll be better off at Sunderland, the size of club that it is, than playing your football at Blackburn Rovers or Coventry City or Hull City, with all due respect to those clubs.
Dortmund in the chat that says, I don't see a lot of anger going towards the team. It generally seems to be pointing at the ownership, and they're the ones that have to put us in the position to be playing with a team without a balance. And I can see the point of them there. Like a lot of people have been targeting like either KLD and Speakman, haven't they?
They have, and I think it's one of those situations. I think it starts at the top. it's not right at the top, it filters through, and then you start finding out, that's when things start to fray, and it becomes disassembled, if you like. And I think it's very easy to target Christian Speakman. And I'm not sitting here trying to be an apologist for Christian Speakman, but I do think it's very easy for people to say this is Christian Speakman's fault, or this is X's fault, or this is Z's fault, because we haven't got the transparency that we need about the way that decisions are made, processes that are going on in terms of recruitment, who the club are looking at, who are they prepared to pay for, so on. I suspect Christian Speakman's hands are as tied as any other employee at the club in what they're allowed to do or what they can do because of the budget that they're working under. So I think that we have to, you sometimes have to take a step back and look at what's happened this season. Tony Mowbray sacking, and ask you a question, why did that happen? The Newcastle United game, Black Cats Bar, and all the farrago that went on around, why did that happen? Michael Beale appointment, which everybody agreed from the start was not the right appointment, why did that happen? And then you start to question the process. And if the process is wrong, then the process has got to be analysed, and that's where there's got to be some sort of transparency. Someone has to explain what was the reason behind Tony Mowbray's sacking, what was the actual truth about the Black Cats Bar and Newcastle United, what was the truth about Michael Beale, was he first choice or wasn't he first choice, and so on. And I don't think over the last 6 months we've had enough transparency about those decisions, or if the club turns around and says, well, we've given you answers on those decisions, have we been told the truth?
I mean, Davey says it quite a lot, don't you, Davey, about when they're going to come down from their ivory towers. And this is what starts rumours off. I mean, there was a massive blast on social media and stuff. Are they going to be selling up and this and that? And the other? But this is what happens when nobody's speaking from upstairs. People start to twist things and rumours start, and that's how it happens, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Nick, last night, do you sense that there's still a good team spirit amongst the lads?
I think so. I think there is. I think I don't question the team spirit compared to, we go back a few years ago and the dressing room was quite toxic. When you listen to Jack Ross and Simon Grace and Phil Parkinson, there were huge issues with individuals and the dressing room. I don't think we've moved on from that. We've got a very, very good group of players. I have one little slight concern. It would be the French group, if you like, and Roussin being a bit isolated. And if you're going to go down that European route, you've really got to find some way of integrating those players. Because if you watch the players when they come out for the warm up, you watch how the French players isolate themselves. They go into a group together, and the English players go into a group together, and so on. And I'm not saying that's because the team spirit is bad, but I think if you want to get the best out of those players, you've got to find some way of bringing them into the fold. You've got to put an arm around them. The club's got to be doing more, I think. And I think we've had this issue with Roussin, with Jefferson Bennett. They're probably the two prime examples of struggling to come to terms with the language, struggling to come to terms with the culture. And the club could arguably be doing more to embrace players like that. It's a learning curve.
Will's still there, Nick?
Sorry?
Are you making a shout for Will's still appointment?
No, I'm not. Will still fascinates me. I think it's an intriguing story, and I think it's an intriguing journey that he's on. I just don't think he's the right person for Sunderland. I mean, look, they might appoint him, and I might be proved wrong. I mean, we're in this zone at the moment where we just don't know what's going to happen. I think my impression is they're going to go down the road of a European youngish coach, which seems to be the trend at the moment. And I think that'll be driven by Kirill and Juan Sartori rather than anybody else. But I come back to, we don't want to go down that road of necessarily going back to a Sam Allardyce, the Peter Reeds, and those footballing characters and personalities. We've got to find that balance between the size of the football club and someone who can deal with it, and someone who is progressive and modern thinking enough to be able to take the club forward in an ever-changing landscape of coaching and the way that football is played at the moment. And I think that's I wouldn't like to be making the decision. I wouldn't like to be making that decision and interviewing prospective coaches and then think to myself, is this the right appointment? Because it's a minefield, absolute minefield.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, take today, Watford have appointed Tom Cleverley. He's 34 years old.
That's right.
He's had a year's coaching. He's played 7 games and won 1 of them, drawn 5, lost the other. And yet he is now been appointed head coach of a championship team. That is fascinating. But it just sort of shows you where we are in terms of thinking of owners and football clubs, because they're all looking at younger coaches. They're all looking, bringing down the age of, and they're all going head coaches. They're all going sporting directors.
Yeah.
So they're all following that model. And, if I had to sit down in a room now and say a Paul Heckingbottom came in and sold me his vision of what he would do with Sunderland, you can see them struggling with it, because they will be looking at Paul Heckingbottom and saying, "Oh, sorry, but aren't you old school? You don't fit our modern." And I think that's partly what Kirill and Juan Sartori are looking at. They want to modernise the image of Sunderland. They want to modernise the football club. So that's why I'm a little bit loath to believe that a Paul Heckingbottom or someone of his ilk could get the Sunderland job.
Just some more comments in the chat. David's agreed. He says, the young kids have been thrown in the deep end, all down to Kildare and Speakman. All down to cash, says Kevin. John Ruddock says this lot needs to go. Dougie says, thanks for this. It's great having Davey and Nick on. And John Ruddock says, this lot are just in it to make money for themselves and not the club. And Dougie says, reminds me of Sunderland under Alan Durbin. Had loads of young players, but had that experience as well. Alan Durbin, that's a while back.
It is a long way back. Again, I think I keep thinking you've got to take a step back about what the intentions of Kirill Louis-Dreyfus are. I think he needs to make it clear what his plan is, because he's approaching a year where he's going to be judged more than he's ever been judged before since he took over.
I suppose he's learning as well, isn't he? KLD.
Of course he is.
Do you know?
But he's got to. I think he's got to take on responsibility. He's got to have broad shoulders and take responsibility for decisions. And I'm not quite sure at the moment we're seeing enough of that part of owning a football club being reflected in the decisions that are being taken and how they're imparted to the fans. And we're in a little bit of a void in terms of the ownership and where it is and what it wants and what his ambitions are with the football club. Because it could, I think, there's in football, almost inevitably, there's a point at which the fan base turns on the owner.
Yeah.
I mean, and Sunderland's no different. They turned on Bob Murray, they turned on Ellis Short, they turned on Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven. It would only be a matter of time before they turn on Kirill Louis-Dreyfus. So I think, you can almost take that as a given. So taking that into account, I think Kirill Louis-Dreyfus has got to look at this year coming up and think this is a massive year for me and my ownership, because there is so much that needs doing, and it won't be done nothing. It means spending money, and that's going to be a big test of him and how much he's prepared to invest or find investors to find that money. So it's a real crossroads, I think, this year coming up.
I think he needs, and sooner than later, I think, and you, as you've said loads of times, Davey, that I think whether they're going to wait until the end of the season, or or KLD or speaking, they definitely need to address the fans in some form related, whether it's a letter or email or whether it's a press conference. What his sort of longish term plans are at the club, because there's still people saying that I wouldn't be surprised if KLD is going to sell up. There's still that unsure, that uncertainty, and if this is what the fans are thinking, what are the players thinking? And that's a lot of speculation, of course, but this is why I think they need to come and speak and let us know, what's your plans and stuff, and it'll put a lot of active minds stop being active, to put it this way. It'll stop the rumours.
Minds to rest.
Put the minds to rest, yeah, because we just don't know, do we? I mean, a lot of people say as well, like, do you agree? Would you say the Championship's the hardest division to get out of?
Well, on the evidence of 4 years in League One, not necessarily, but it is hard to get out of. I think it's going to get harder to get out of, because I think there's an agenda. I think the Premier League's got an agenda. The Premier League's agenda is what they would dearly love is a closed shop.
Yeah.
It's probably a way down the line, but I think in their dreams, what they would like is a franchise Premier League where there are 20 teams in it, and ultimately it wouldn't be promotion and relegation. It will be it will be financial. It would be a little bit like rugby league and rugby union, where you have to fulfil all the criteria with your ground and finance if you are going to break into the party. So their dream, I think, is to have this cartel, and that is sort of reflected in where we are now, with the top three in the Championship are the three that came down pretty much. Ipswich are in there, obviously, but the three that came down are in the race to go straight back up. Three that went up are the prime candidates at the moment, excluding the fact that Forest and Everton have got these points deductions. They're prime candidates to come back down again. So next season, the Championship will have arguably Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United back in the fold, who are going to be in a position of strength because they have parachute payments. So they potentially are going to be the three strongest teams in the league, because the other teams now have been a bit frightened off by what's happened about the points deductions and the threats that are being made of point deductions to teams in the Championship next season. So potentially Luton, Sheffield United and Burnley will be the front runners next season. They will arguably go back up. Three weakened teams in the Premier League. And if you look at the way the Premier League set up, your argument would be it will potentially, possibly be Brentford, Bournemouth, the small Premier League clubs, because they're ultimately clubs the Premier League probably don't want in their top 20. And so gradually, you're going to get a situation where teams like Sunderland, if they don't get promotion in the next year or two, are going to find themselves marooned in effectively a League Two, and the Premier League will be somewhere that is unattainable, because Sunderland won't be able to, under the current model, current ownership, put in the money that they need to put in to break into that cartel.
So you're talking like a Super League, Nick?
Well, that's what they want. They want a European Super League, and they want a Super League.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it on another level happening with the women's game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Women's Super League want Newcastle United in their Super League, because they know that they will attract TV revenue. They know they will attract big crowds to St James's if they play there. So the same, to a lesser degree, the same thing is happening in the women's game. I mean, it seems to me evident from the manoeuvres that those clubs made for a European Super League that they want to do the same for the Premier League. And I think that one small example of that was the FA Cup replays this last week, where the FA just seemed to have given in to the Premier League. You know, the FA should have shown more. The FA's responsible for all the teams in the FA Cup, from the Northern Premier League down to the Premier League. But where was there any consultation? Where was there any acknowledgement that the first 2 rounds of the FA Cup are not dependent on Premier League teams playing in them? Where was any consultation? There was none. The FA have lost their spine. They've lost their ability to stand up to the Premier League. The Premier League now is calling all the shots. Silence.
I was just holding a sneeze in there. I've been listening to all the radio stations and stuff, and it's the big fish are getting bigger. It's as simple as that, isn't it? And it's
well, I think that's the other side of it. These new changes in the rules is that they're now agreeing. The Premier League clubs are agreeing that the teams at the top can only make 4 times what the lowest team in the division in the Premier League can make from financial TV deals and so on. But what that effectively means is that all the excess money that those big clubs make is creamed off by the directors and shareholders, and so the big clubs can potentially become richer and richer and richer because the rules allow the owners to independently put their own money in to bolster the clubs and bolster the revenue of those clubs.
Yeah.
So they're circumventing all the rules that they're trying to. They're making their own rules to protect their positions. And when it looks like the rules are actually going against them, they make them up again. They say, right, we're scrapping that one. We're going to do this now. So all the time, the Premier League is driving the rule book. They're changing the rules to suit the teams and the clubs and the structure that they want in the pyramid.
Just got some more comments on the chat. David Brown says Alex Pritchard didn't deserve a pay rise from 6,500. This has more to do than players' wages being affordable. David says, wonder if the ownership knew it would be very hard to go up this season with the teams in the league, and it probably should be easier to go up next year. And John says, I said this 2 years ago. No one listened when I came out of Wembley, and I said to my son, now the problems will start. Neil got us up, but this lot would have been happy to stay in Division 1. Some harsh comments there.
I think they're overly harsh. I don't think any self-respecting coach or manager or whatever, never. They will always try their hardest to get the team promoted or achieve something. The players do as well. I think it's easy to say, oh, we didn't want to go up this season. I don't think you would find one player, if you spoke to them honestly, didn't believe that they would give their all and they believed that they were good enough to go up. Ultimately, you've got, I think, at the start of the season, when we did our predictions, I said Sunderland would finish mid-table. They're going to finish mid-table. And it's not a huge surprise to me because I think last season it was a poorer division. They overachieved. They had a fantastic player in Ahmad. And that actually what it did was basically make the expectation this season unrealistic. If we swapped it round, if we had this season, last season, this season, I think the comments and the thoughts about the club will be a lot different.
Yeah.
It just shows you, how good the Sunderland fans are as well. Yes, they can be hostile, but if the Sunderland fans see some effort then they'll love you to bits. I mean,
Well, that's a very good point, because that's the point I made to Trey Hume last night.
yeah,
You know, one thing, because Trey Hume fans love him, and you know why they love him? Because he throws everything into a tackle. He throws everything into the game, and you will never, if you watch a player giving 100%, and it's not just Sunderland, you hear it at other clubs. If you watch players giving 100% and they've given their all in a game and they've lost it 3-0 or they've lost it 4-3, you won't walk away and feel that that you've been let down, but because you know that the players have given their all. It's interesting because I had a conversation recently, because when we were at Southampton, we obviously we remember the 8-0 defeat, and subsequently the club said, or Vito Manoni sparked it off, all the supporters should get their money back, and that seemed to be the obvious consequence of losing 8-0 at Southampton. But what transpired over the next couple of days was that all the fans that had gone to Southampton said, oh, hang on a minute, we don't go down to Southampton to want our money back if we've lost 8-0. We go because we support Sunderland Football Club. And if they go and lose 8-0, they lose 8-0. That's football. That's what happens. We don't need to get our money back for doing something we love to do, because we love this football club. And we accept that defeat as part and parcel of supporting the club.
it's
That's
true.
what you do.
It's like when we Leeds United. I mean, we got beaten. We got thrashed 5-1 off Blackburn at the Stadium of Light, and fast forward a little bit. Full time whistle goes at Ellen Road 0-0. The Sunderland fans for the last 15-20 minutes at Ellen Road were making the noise, and the Leeds supporters were saying, "Goodness me, you think Sunderland were in our position, challenging to go up for the top two, the way they were celebrating." Well, they were pleased because they seen the team put in a great team performance and effort, and it made the Sunderland fans' night.
Look, it's as frustrating as hell. It it is. League One, the seasons they've languished, but everybody. Coming back to last night, the Player of the Year awards, the fans, 350 Sunderland fans in that room, absolutely adored the players.
Mm-hmm.
And I said last night, the players need to see this. Players need to see how much the football club means to these people. These people live and breathe the football club. All they're asking of you is, when you run out on the pitch, you give 100%. You give 100%, they will love you forever. But if they get the impression that you don't care, you're not bothered, Sunderland's just stop on the road, then you've got a problem, because that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
And yes, we want to win things. Yes, we want to get promoted. Yes, we want to win the FA Cup again, and so on and so on. But I think we're all realists. Ultimately, and as much as we can rant and rave and say, I'm not going to renew a season card, I'm not going to come back. We all do. They all do. I think the season card sales this season are fairly respectable for next season, because it's in the blood. It's you can't let go. I always think back to the game when Steve Bruce was in charge at Chelsea, and they didn't sell out the allocation at Stamford Bridge, and how many of those fans that had decided not to go regretted it because they won 3-0.
Yeah.
And it's that moment you think, if I don't renew my season card, I'm going to find next season's the season Sunderland pull up trees and they walk the division. So it's that delicate balancing act, isn't
Well, you've
it?
mentioned, as you mentioned
ultimately,
before, hasn't you, Nick? You said, like, if this is what you have to expect. It's like every time you walk through the turnstiles, it's a gamble, isn't it? You don't know what they're going to turn up, what the result's going to be. You just have to take it on the chin when they win 4-0, and you have to take it on the chin when they lose 4-0.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there is a caveat to that. If you're losing 4-0 every week, then questions get asked.
Yeah,
and so on.
yeah, absolutely.
But generally, in the wider scheme of things, you know, in the Championship, you're going to lose X number of games, you're going to win X number of games. Tony Mowbray always used to get it right. He says, look, I know we're going to lose football matches. I know that if I'm sitting here and I've lost 10 on the bounce, I'm probably going to get the sack. I think people, I think Tony Mowbray is a brilliant example of someone who was unbelievably grounded in what football can and can't do and what it can do to you as an individual. And he had this real sense of perspective. And I think sometimes we are all guilty of losing that sense of perspective. But the football club themselves can help by being, by owning it. And I don't think at the moment we have an owner who's owned it with the fans. There's not enough. They've not crossed the divide yet enough to embrace. You can overstep the mark. Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven went too far in that respect. So there's a balance to be struck somewhere. And at the moment, we've not got that balance. I think at the moment we've got a bit of a void between Cyril Louis-Dreyfus and his ownership and where the football team is. And somewhere, somehow, this summer, that gap has got to be pulled together, and it's got to be brought together.
I'll ask this for both of you, Davey, and you, Nick, as well. Where realistically should Sunderland be aiming for next season? Should it be for the playoffs? Should it be automatics, or should it be happy to just consolidate in the Championship for another season?
No,
I'll
me,
go on, David.
as a supporter, your club should always be aimed the highest it can possibly go. You start the season, everybody starts on the same points. But saying that, we'll have players that'll go through brick walls. But you still need the team to be managed properly, and you need the hierarchy to put the money in to produce gold dust like Ahmad, which you need if you're going to get out that division.
I'd agree with Davey. I think your ambition's got to be, you've got to start the season and believe that you can get promoted.
Yeah.
If you don't, then what's the point? You know, everybody. If you're
well, look at Ipswich, absolutely.
United, Ipswich is whilst they throw money at it. But if you're Sutton United, what's your dream? What's your dream if you own or you're a Sutton United supporter? It's to play in the Premier League, and to get there, you've got to win promotion from League Two. So you right from the start, your ambition is to get promoted. That should still apply to Sunderland in the Championship. What's your dream? To be in the Premier League, to be in the Champions League, to win the FA Cup, and to get there, you've got to win promotion. So that's got to be your starting point. You've got to start the season believing, even if it's against all the odds, that you can get promoted.
And it's amazing how far self-belief can take you. I mean, the year Leicester City won the Premier League, it's self-belief, team spirit. It's anything can happen.
If you want another example, is Luton Town.
Yep.
What Luton Town have done is remarkable, and what Luton have done in the Premier League is remarkable, because they've not thrown, vast amounts of money at it.
No.
But what they've done as a team is absolutely fantastic. I mean, obviously a soft spot because Mick Harford's there, and I think he's done and I think he is not getting the credit maybe that he deserves, because I think Mick's been the architect of what Luton have done. But that is a remarkable story. So it's teams like Luton, and back in the day, your Bradford Cities, your Barnsleys, and so on, that all made it to the Premier League, that prove it can be done. It's not unachievable, but it's at the same time, you're fighting against a Premier League hierarchy and a Premier League club structure that's doing their damnedest to make it difficult, more and more difficult.
Yeah, the gap is getting bigger and bigger, Nick, isn't it? I mean,
live that dream. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the gap's getting bigger, isn't it? I mean, Burnley, Sheffield United, they were blowing teams apart last season in the Championship. Look where they are now in the Premier League, and yeah, it's nice to get to the Premier League, but is some fans say, what's the big all and end all to get to the Premier League to just get thumped week in and week out? What's the joy in that? Would you rather be in the Championship, win more games, or be in the Premier League and get thumped and come straight back down?
but I always think that's quite weird because we all want to be in the Premier League, and we know that, and we know, and yet we still, it's like what's the analogy in a way? I mean, you don't want to be punished, you don't want to be, but at the same time, there's part of you is willing it on because you know that when you get there, it's going to be hell, but you still want to go.
You still want to go then, but you're whipping boys.
Yeah, that's it. Because you go there, perversely, you go there thinking we're the Sunderland 1973 and we're going to beat Leeds. It's a sort of we'll go there and actually like when I mentioned earlier on about the coach comes in and says, I'm going to be the coach that turns things around. I'm going to be the coach that takes Sunderland back, and I'm going to be the coach that does this and does that. Actually, it never happens. But you always believe you're the big, going to be the team that do it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what drives you on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kevin in the chat says, thanks so much for putting this show on, Cabbie. Very, very enjoyable. Big thanks to Barnesy and Davey. Pixel Rich says, great broadcast, mate. Hi, Nick. Long time no see, and great to put a face on the famous Davey. The famous Davey.
You look like the drowned submariner.
It was me that spotted Dave. I mean, listen to the phone-in show, and the airwaves the speakers just blast when I'm in my taxi and Davey comes on. You're like, Marco, you know what I mean? And it's like full of energy, and I just put a comment on my video. I says like he's a legend, this Davey, and Davey just messages out of the blue and says I've got to have him on here,
He's a legend. I mean, look, we don't always agree, but I think the nice thing is that we can all have a debate. We can all have a discussion.
Yeah. It is I.
Stuart.
Hello.
I watch all the podcasts that you could possibly watch, right? I watch everything on the internet. But I must say, this podcast with Barnesy has been the best podcast I've ever been involved with. The knowledge that man's got of football in Sunderland has absolutely took my breath away.
Well, you could sit here all night, couldn't you? Are you available for midnight till midnight, Nick?
What's on at 9? It's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure, and
thanks for taking your time out, Nick. It's been great having you on.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me. Thank you.
You're welcome, and have a good night and take care. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed.
Good night, Nick.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. That was brilliant, Stuart.
Did you enjoy it, Davey?
Thoroughly. Well, put this way, it's the quietest I've ever been, because he just had me in the palm of his hand.
Aye. He's spot on, isn't he?
His knowledge is fantastic.
Yeah, and gentleman as well. I mean, there's not many people.
He's absolutely, Stuart, he's fantastic. You could just listen to him all night.
Hold on a minute, your screen's gone because thingy's left him just editing. Yeah, he was like he just rattled off, didn't he?
But he could speak so clear, and he understands everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thoroughly enjoyed it, and yet. And your viewers must have loved that, like listening to him. What a coup getting him on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, hold on a second. I'm just getting you. Just keep speaking, Davey lad. I'm just.
Yeah, I'm saying what a coup to get him on, because I think I've seen him on the Sunderland Network podcast, and that's about it.
Aye, absolutely. His knowledge is just like class,
It's
innit?
an absolute coup. He's absolutely brilliant. Oh, fascinating.
I know it's just surprising, you know, how much he does know. Do you know what I mean?
Right. But the way
Um,
he puts things across, it's dead right. When he was speaking about the Premier League, the way they're trying to take over football, he's dead right.
aye, I know. It just makes like a lot of sense, doesn't he?
Aye.
And it was a laugh when I when I says to you to Nick the fact, like, you know, when I heard Davey coming on the speakers and I just heard like more good, you know what I mean? I just thought I've got to get Davey in here, like, you know. I'm just
He's that was brilliant.
so you got much plans tonight then?
No, I just want to set up the football. I think the Newcastle game and that.
The Newcastle game, there's some I believe Man United's losing at home to Sheffield United, is that right? Aye.
Oh my God, that'll be fun. He'll get the sack. We might get him as manager. Well, it's 1-1 now.
Oh, is it 1-1, is it?
Aye.
Oh, wait a minute.
1-1.
I've just got your face back here, Davey. Hold on.
Everton's back to Liverpool.
Someone says to me they got a penalty.
Oh, I don't know. I've just seen the scores here. 1-0 Everton half time.
Aye. We've had quite some good viewers in, Davey, tonight. Like, I mean, considering there's been a Premier League. But it's good.
You've done really well, mate.
It's nice to have good words from you, though. It means a lot, mate. You're saying like you've enjoyed your podcast and stuff. There's hundreds of comments coming in on the chat, like
Brilliant.
saying how good you are and how they've enjoyed it and stuff.
They'll have enjoyed Nick because his knowledge is fantastic.
Yeah, he's sensible about what he says, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Look, I mean, there's a lot of Sunderland YouTubers wouldn't you know, give the time because they're too busy and whatnot. But you know, he seems to have time for everybody, Nick, doesn't he?
Aye, brilliant.
Right, so so same time next Monday, Davey. Are you about?
Yeah, no problem, mate.
Okay.
See you later, Stuart. Good night.
See you later. Good night. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Mate.
Enjoyed it. Ta-ra, pal.